The recorded history of England's monarchy begins with Alfred the Great, who became King of Wessex in 871. Alfred inherited a kingdom under threat from repeated Viking incursions, particularly from the Great Heathen Army, which had invaded East Anglia and Northumbria before turning its attention to Wessex. Alfred's early reign was marked by military pressure from these Danish forces, necessitating defensive and strategic reforms. He strengthened the kingdom's military organization by constructing fortified towns known as buzz and by reorganizing the army into a system of local levies capable of rapid mobilization. Alfred also emphasized naval development to counter Viking raids along the coast, constructing a fleet capable of confronting Viking longships. Alfred's military actions stabilized Wessex, preventing the Danish expansion from engulfing southern England. Beyond military measures, he initiated a series of legal and educational reforms designed to consolidate internal governance and unify his kingdom under both secular and ecclesiastical authority. He codified laws drawing from earlier Anglo-Saxon codes, such as those of Ione and Ethelbert of Kent, emphasizing compensation for crimes, the protection of property, and the regulation of social order. Alfred also promoted learning and literacy, commissioning translations of Latin works into Old English and establishing schools to educate clerics and administrators, aiming to strengthen governance through a literate elite. Alfred's death in 899 marked the transition of power to his son, Edward the Elder, who ruled until 924. Edward continued the process of consolidating England under Wessex rule. His reign was characterized by military campaigns to bring Mercia fully under control and to defend against renewed Viking incursions in Danelaw, the area of northern and eastern England under Scandinavian law. Edward employed both force and diplomatic marriages, aligning with Mercian and Northumbrian nobility to secure loyalty. He also strengthened the network of buzz established by his father, ensuring that towns could function as both defensive structures and centers of economic activity. These measures extended Wessex authority across much of southern and central England, setting the stage for the first fully united English kingdom. Edward's successor, Athelstan, who ruled from 924 to 939, is considered the first king of all England. Athelstan continued military campaigns against Norse rulers in Northumbria and against Welsh princes to the west. He issued extensive charters confirming landholdings and privileges, reinforcing central authority over regional nobles. Athelstan maintained control over Northumbria by strategically placing loyal ealdormen and establishing a presence in formerly independent Viking settlements. His reign also included participation in international diplomacy. He secured alliances through marriage with European rulers, including the rulers of France and Burgundy, which enhanced England's prestige abroad. Ethelstan's administration emphasized uniformity of law and consolidation of royal authority, ensuring that regional variations did not undermine central governance. Following Athelstan, the English throne passed to Edmund I in 939, whose reign lasted until 946. Edmund faced continued pressure from Norse rulers, particularly in Northumbria, and he had to quell rebellions among local magnates. He relied on a combination of military expeditions and negotiated settlements to maintain the kingdom's integrity. Edmund also worked to strengthen ecclesiastical structures, supporting monasteries and bishoprics, which in turn reinforced royal authority. His policies emphasized a balance between military enforcement and legal and religious legitimacy, as a means of consolidating power across the realm. Edward succeeded Edmund in 946 and ruled until 955. His reign was dominated by ongoing efforts to bring Northumbria firmly under English control, confronting the residual power of Norse rulers and the influence of local magnates. Edward employed strategies of direct military intervention, placing loyalists in key positions and negotiating agreements with semi-independent leaders. He also maintained fiscal and administrative reforms initiated under his predecessors, ensuring the continuity of governance and the collection of tribute and taxation necessary to support the monarchy and military defenses. Edwig, also known as Edwy, ruled from 955 to 959. His reign was comparatively short and marked by tensions with both the nobility and the church. Land disputes and ecclesiastical appointments created friction, and his authority was challenged in the North and Midlands. Edwig's focus remained on maintaining the existing structures of governance rather than initiating substantial reforms. Following his death, his brother Edgar, known as Edgar the Peaceful, ascended to the throne in 959 and ruled until 975. Edgar's reign was characterized by relative internal stability, with continued emphasis on legal reform, ecclesiastical support, and consolidation of central authority. He maintained control over Northumbria and expanded influence over Welsh territories, combining diplomacy, military presence, and religious sanction to govern effectively. Edgar codified laws, supported monastic reform, and promoted clerical education, reinforcing the administrative foundations laid by Alfred and Edward. His reign demonstrated the growing integration of royal authority, ecclesiastical structures, and regional governance. Edward the Martyr, Edgar's son, ruled briefly from 975 to 978. His reign was marked by tension between competing noble factions. Edward's assassination led to the ascension of Athelred II, known as Athelred the Unready, who ruled from 978 to 1013 and again from 1014 to 1016. Athelred faced persistent Viking invasions, particularly from Danish leaders such as Sweyn Forkbeard. His strategies included paying tribute to Viking forces, known as Danegeld, and mobilizing local militias. These measures were only partially effective, and the kingdom experienced repeated raids and periods of occupation. Ethelred's administration struggled with internal dissent, with regional nobles sometimes acting independently of royal command, reflecting the challenges of maintaining centralized authority in a divided and militarily pressured kingdom. During Ethelred's first reign, Sweyn Forkbeard invaded England, briefly claiming kingship in 1013 before he died in 1014. Athelred returned to the throne following Sweyn's death, but died in 1016. Athelred's son, Edmund Ironside, succeeded him but faced immediate conflict with Knut the Great, Sweyn's son. Edmund's resistance to Danish invasion was notable for military engagements across Wessex and Mercia, but he eventually agreed to a division of the kingdom with Knut before dying later that year. The consolidation of Danish authority followed, with Knut ruling England from 1016 to 1035. Knut's administration successfully integrated Danish and English institutions, maintaining the existing legal framework while placing loyalists in positions of authority. He reinforced the monarchy's stability through marriage alliances and careful management of both English and Scandinavian elites. Following Knut, His sons Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut ruled briefly, from 1035 to 1040 and 1040 to 1042, respectively. Harold maintained control over Wessex and other southern regions, while Harthacnut's short reign was marked by taxation and naval preparations, reflecting ongoing concerns about external threats. After Harthacnut's death, Edward the Confessor, son of Athelred, ascended the throne in 1042, ruling until 1066. Edward's reign emphasized religious patronage, including support for Westminster Abbey and the monastic reforms associated with the Benedictine tradition. He sought to stabilize succession and manage relations with powerful English and Norman nobles, navigating a delicate balance between domestic governance and foreign alliances. Edward's relatively weak political position allowed the rise of influential earls, particularly the Godwin family, whose power increased significantly over his reign. Upon Edward the Confessor's death in January 1066, a succession crisis emerged. Multiple claimants, including Harold Godwin's son, William of Normandy, and Harald Hardrada of Norway, asserted claims based on lineage, prior oaths, and political arrangements. Harold Godwin's son was chosen by the Witenagemot, the Council of Nobles, and crowned shortly after Edward's death. Harold's reign lasted only several months before he faced invasions from both Harald Hardrada and William of Normandy. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge in September 1066, Harold defeated Hardrada, ending Norwegian claims to the English throne. Shortly thereafter, William landed in southern England, leading to the Battle of Hastings on October 14, 1066. Harold Godwin's son was killed in battle, and William emerged victorious, establishing the Norman claim to England and ending the era of Anglo-Saxon rule. The period from Alfred the Great to Harold Godwin's son demonstrates the progression from localized rule under Wessex to the emergence of a unified English monarchy. Centralization of authority, integration of ecclesiastical structures, legal codification, and military organization were recurring themes. Each monarch contributed to the consolidation of England, either through military campaigns, administrative reforms, or diplomatic alliances. The Viking invasions and Danish occupation imposed external pressures that tested the resilience of the monarchy and shaped subsequent governance. Throughout this period, succession crises and noble power struggles highlighted the fragility of centralized authority and the importance of both political and military acumen in maintaining control. The Anglo-Saxon kings' engagement with regional rulers, foreign powers, and ecclesiastical institutions set the foundation for England's future monarchy. Military innovations, including fortified boroughs and reorganized levies, allowed the kingdom to withstand repeated invasions, while legal and ecclesiastical reforms reinforced social cohesion and administrative control. Dynastic continuity, combined with strategic marriages and alliances, facilitated the gradual unification of diverse territories under a single monarchy. By the time of Harold Godwinson's death and the Norman conquest, England had transitioned from a collection of independent Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to a centralized realm with an established legal framework, administrative structures, and ecclesiastical oversight capable of supporting a unified monarchy. The Norman conquest of England began with William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed the English throne following the death of Edward the Confessor in 1066. William's assertion of kingship was based on both a purported promise from Edward and a familial connection through distant kinship, as well as a claim of prior support from the Witenagemot, though that council ultimately elected Harold Godwin's son. William's invasion culminated at the Battle of Hastings on October 14, 1066, where Harold was killed and the Anglo-Saxon defense of England collapsed. Following his victory, William systematically secured control over England through a combination of military occupation, political integration, and the imposition of Norman feudal structures. William I, known as William the Conqueror, was crowned King of England on December 25, 1066, at Westminster Abbey. His reign, extending until 1087, was characterized by efforts to consolidate authority over a kingdom that remained culturally, linguistically, and administratively distinct from Normandy. To prevent rebellion, William replaced Anglo-Saxon nobles with loyal Norman lords, distributing lands to secure military and political allegiance. The Domesday Survey of 1086 represented the most extensive administrative undertaking of his reign, recording land ownership, taxation obligations, and economic resources throughout England. This survey allowed for efficient extraction of revenues, legal oversight, and monitoring of potential insurrections. The early years of William's reign involved extensive military campaigns, particularly in the north and southwest, where resistance persisted. Rebellions in Northumbria and Durham were met with both military force and widespread punitive measures, including the systematic destruction of settlements, farmland, and infrastructure, known historically as the Harrying of the North. This campaign ensured the subjugation of northern territories, preventing further organized resistance and consolidating royal authority. William also emphasized the construction of motte and bailey castles throughout the kingdom, providing defensive strong points and bases for garrison troops, reinforcing Norman dominance over previously independent Anglo-Saxon territories. William II, commonly referred to as William Rufus, succeeded his father in 1087 and ruled until 1100. His reign was notable for the continued consolidation of royal power, particularly in southern and central England, as well as in regions bordering Wales and Scotland. William Rufus faced multiple challenges, including disputes with the church over investiture and the appointment of bishops, as well as recurrent revolts among Norman barons. He continued his father's policy of castle building, fortifying strategic locations, and maintaining garrisons to assert control. William II also pursued military expeditions into Normandy to protect his continental holdings and to enforce his claims against rival noble factions. His death in 1100 during a hunting expedition led to the accession of his younger brother, Henry I. Henry I, who reigned from 1100 to 1135, implemented a series of administrative and legal reforms that strengthened royal authority and centralized governance. He issued the Charter of Liberties upon accession, which sought to address grievances regarding the arbitrary power exercised by the monarchy under previous rulers. Henry established mechanisms for justice, including itinerant justices and a system of royal writs, allowing the crown to oversee the administration of law across the kingdom. He also promoted literacy and record-keeping within the royal chancery, enhancing bureaucratic capacity and continuity. Henry's reign was marked by campaigns to secure Normandy, assert dominance over Wales, and mediate relations with Scotland, employing both military and diplomatic strategies. Succession during Henry I's reign became a central concern following the death of his only legitimate son, William Audalin, in the White Ship disaster of 1120. The loss of his heir led Henry to designate his daughter, Matilda, as his successor, creating tensions with a faction of nobles who opposed female succession. Despite extensive preparations, upon Henry's death in 1135, the throne was seized by his nephew Stephen of Blois, initiating a period of civil conflict known as the Anarchy. During this period, from 1135 to 1154, Stephen faced opposition from Matilda and her supporters, leading to intermittent military campaigns, sieges of castles, and contested control over key regions of England. The conflict demonstrated the fragility of early Norman succession and highlighted the dependence of royal authority on baronial loyalty and military capacity. The period of the anarchy was characterized by widespread disruption of governance, with nobles asserting de facto autonomy over their lands, conducting raids, and fortifying castles independently of the crown. Stephen's inability to establish consistent control over northern, western, and central regions led to protracted warfare, which had significant social and economic consequences, including the displacement of populations and the destruction of agricultural resources. The eventual settlement in 1153, mediated by negotiations between Stephen and Matilda's son, Henry, established Henry as heir apparent and laid the groundwork for the succession of the House of Plantagenet, concluding the civil conflict. This resolution ensured continuity of the monarchy and set the stage for the administrative and legal consolidation that characterized subsequent reigns. Throughout the Norman period, the relationship between the monarchy and the church was a critical element of governance. William I and his successors sought to control ecclesiastical appointments to secure loyalty and maintain oversight over spiritual as well as temporal authority. Conflicts arose, particularly over the investiture of bishops, the collection of church revenues, and the autonomy of monastic institutions. William Rufus, for example, faced repeated confrontations with Archbishop Anselm of Canterbury regarding ecclesiastical prerogatives and the authority to appoint clergy. Henry I successfully negotiated concordats that balanced royal and papal interests, formalizing procedures for appointments and clarifying jurisdictional boundaries. The Church's role extended to judicial functions, literacy, record-keeping, and the moral legitimacy of rulership, making ecclesiastical cooperation essential to Norman governance. Military organization under the Norman kings relied heavily on feudal obligations, with vassals providing troops in exchange for land and privileges. The construction of castles, both as offensive and defensive structures, enabled control over strategic points, secured trade routes, and served as administrative centers. Norman armies combined mounted cavalry with infantry levies drawn from both Norman and local populations. These forces were deployed not only to suppress rebellion, but also to conduct campaigns in Wales, Scotland, and on the continent, reflecting the dual responsibilities of the monarchy to defend England and protect continental holdings in Normandy. The Norman monarchy also introduced significant changes in landholding and legal systems. Feudal tenure replaced many of the customary Anglo-Saxon arrangements, with land held from the crown in exchange for military service. This system created a hierarchy of obligations, linking barons and knights directly to royal authority. William I's Domesday Survey codified these holdings, establishing a record that facilitated taxation, feudal administration, and judicial oversight. Henry I's legal reforms built upon this foundation, standardizing procedures for disputes over land and inheritance, thereby consolidating the central authority of the crown over previously semi-autonomous regions. Norman kings maintained relationships with neighboring powers in France, Scotland, and the Low Countries, both to secure borders and to assert influence in continental affairs. Alliances were formed through dynastic marriages, treaties, and military cooperation. These relationships often required military interventions or diplomatic negotiations to protect Norman interests abroad, particularly in Normandy, where English kings were also dukes, and in Wales, where frontier lordships were established to manage relations with local rulers. Control over the Scottish border involved both military campaigns and strategic marriages to secure loyalty and prevent incursions. William I, William II, and Henry I all contributed to the development of administrative institutions that strengthened the monarchy. Royal writs, itinerant justices, and localized sheriffs allowed the crown to exert influence across distant regions. Taxation systems, including the Danegeld, continued in modified form, and fines from legal cases provided revenues essential for sustaining the military and administrative apparatus. The integration of Anglo-Saxon structures with Norman innovations facilitated a more coherent system of governance capable of managing both internal and external pressures. Stephen's reign underscored the limits of monarchical authority when succession was contested. The fragmentation of control during the anarchy illustrated the dependence of the crown on feudal loyalty, military strength, and negotiation with powerful magnates. Despite these challenges, the period also reinforced the importance of legal frameworks, military infrastructure, and ecclesiastical cooperation in maintaining the monarchy's long-term stability. The eventual succession of Henry II marked the transition from early Norman rule to the Plantagenet dynasty, establishing continuity in governance and the ongoing centralization of power within the English monarchy. Throughout the Norman period, England experienced significant changes in social, economic, and administrative structures. The introduction of Norman aristocracy reshaped the composition of the landholding elite, while existing Anglo-Saxon traditions were modified to accommodate feudal principles. Castles, towns, and ecclesiastical centers became focal points of administration, law, and defense. Military obligations under feudal tenure ensured that the crown could mobilize forces when necessary, while systematic record-keeping, as exemplified by the Domesday Survey, enhanced the crown's ability to manage resources and assert authority across the kingdom. The integration of Normandy and England under a single monarch created a dual focus for Norman kings, who had to balance continental interests with the governance of England. Military campaigns in Normandy and the defense of borders required careful allocation of resources, the maintenance of garrisons, and the cultivation of loyalty among local lords. Domestically, the crown invested in legal and administrative reforms to ensure that the kingdom remained cohesive, minimizing the potential for rebellion and maximizing revenue collection. Ecclesiastical support, particularly from monastic institutions and the episcopacy, reinforced the legitimacy of Norman rule and provided infrastructure for governance, literacy, and cultural continuity. The Norman king's emphasis on central authority, military infrastructure, legal codification, and integration of feudal systems laid the groundwork for the subsequent development of the English monarchy under the Plantagenet dynasty. By consolidating territorial control, establishing a hierarchy of obligations, and fostering cooperation with the Church, William I, William II, Henry I, and Stephen ensured that the monarchy could endure both internal challenges and external threats. The period from 1066 to 1154 represents a critical phase in the evolution of England's political structures, bridging the transition from Anglo-Saxon rule to a monarchy capable of centralized governance, territorial administration, and integration within the broader European context. The Plantagenet dynasty began with Henry II, who ascended the English throne in 1154 following the resolution of the succession disputes that marked the final years of Stephen's reign. Henry II, born in 1133, was the son of Geoffrey of Anjou and Matilda, daughter of Henry I, and his accession represented the unification of extensive continental territories with the English crown, creating the Angevin Empire. Henry II's early rule focused on consolidating authority, restoring order after the civil conflict of Stephen's reign, and asserting control over both England and his continental holdings, which included Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and Aquitaine through his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine. Henry II implemented comprehensive legal reforms to strengthen royal authority and standardize governance. He expanded the use of royal courts and itinerant justices, which allowed for uniform application of law across the kingdom, reducing the influence of local courts dominated by barons. He codified existing Anglo-Norman legal practices into a coherent framework, emphasizing property rights, feudal obligations, and criminal justice. These reforms laid the foundation for the English common law system, ensuring that the crown could exercise oversight over disputes and maintain stability in both rural and urban areas. Henry also reasserted control over the church through attempts to limit clerical exemptions from secular courts, culminating in the conflict with Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, which highlighted the delicate balance between royal authority and ecclesiastical independence. Henry II's foreign policy reflected the necessity of defending and expanding the Angevin Empire. He conducted military campaigns in Wales, attempting to secure border regions and establish marcher lordships, while in Ireland, he initiated expeditions that would later lead to nominal English overlordship. On the continent, Henry defended his holdings against both internal challenges from rebellious vassals and external threats, particularly from Louis VII of France and the French crown's claims over Normandy and surrounding territories. The maintenance of these territories required a combination of military presence, strategic marriages, and alliances with local lords, demonstrating the dual responsibility of English kings to govern both the domestic realm and continental possessions. Richard I, known as Richard the Lionheart, ascended the throne in 1189 following Henry II's death. Richard's reign was dominated by his participation in the Third Crusade, leaving England under the administration of regents. While abroad, he relied on trusted officials, including William Longchamp and later Hubert Walter, to maintain governance, collect revenues, and defend the realm. Richard's involvement in the crusade necessitated significant taxation and the levying of scutage, a monetary substitute for military service, which provided funds for his campaigns. These fiscal measures were contentious but essential for supporting the king's military endeavors abroad. Richard's absence highlighted the importance of administrative structures established by his father, which allowed the monarchy to function even in the king's absence. Following Richard's death in 1199, his brother John assumed the throne. John's reign, from 1199 to 1216, was characterized by conflict with both domestic barons and foreign powers. He lost significant territories in France, including Normandy, Anjou, and Maine, following campaigns against Philip II of France. Domestically, John faced revolts from dissatisfied barons and bishops, provoked by heavy taxation, disputes over inheritance, and challenges to his administrative authority. In response to baronial pressure, John agreed to the Magna Carta in 1215, a document that imposed limits on royal prerogative, established certain legal protections, and required regular consultation with the baronage for taxation. Although John attempted to annul the Magna Carta with papal support, the document remained a foundational precedent for limiting monarchical power in England. After John's death, his son Henry III succeeded as a child king, ruling from 1216 to 1272. Henry's minority was overseen by regents, notably William Marshal, who maintained stability during the First Barons' War. Henry III's later reign involved attempts to restore royal authority, manage baronial descent, and maintain control over the remaining continental territories, including Gascony. His reign saw the development of parliamentary institutions as consultation with barons and clergy became increasingly formalized, reflecting both practical governance needs and responses to political pressure. Henry also invested heavily in ecclesiastical projects, including the construction of Westminster Abbey, consolidating both royal prestige and the church's symbolic authority. Edward I, who ruled from 1272 to 1307, continued efforts to strengthen central authority, expand territorial control, and enforce legal uniformity. He conducted campaigns against the Welsh princes, culminating in the conquest of Wales and the establishment of marcher lordships. Edward also faced resistance in Scotland, including the assertion of independence by figures such as William Wallace and Robert the Bruce. Militarily, Edward relied on a combination of feudal levies and professional forces, adapting strategies to confront both conventional and guerrilla warfare. Domestically, Edward I reformed the administration of justice, codifying laws and improving record-keeping, contributing to the evolution of a more centralized state. His reign marked the integration of legal, military, and administrative mechanisms to enforce royal authority effectively across England and its dependent territories. Edward II, ruling from 1307 to 1327, faced significant challenges in maintaining the authority established by his predecessors. His reliance on favorites, including Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despencer, created tensions with the baronage, leading to repeated uprisings and disputes over the governance of England. Edward II's military campaigns, particularly against Scotland, were largely unsuccessful, culminating in defeats such as the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. His inability to maintain control over the nobility and ensure military success undermined the stability of the monarchy, ultimately resulting in his deposition in 1327 in favor of his son, Edward III. Edward III, ascending to the throne in 1327 and ruling until 1377, restored royal authority and initiated a period of military and administrative consolidation. Edward III's reign is particularly notable for the beginning of the Hundred Years' War, a prolonged conflict with France based on claims to the French crown through maternal lineage. Military campaigns, including the Battle of Crécy in 1346 and the subsequent victories at Poitiers in 1356, established England as a formidable military power. Edward also invested in naval capabilities, recognizing the strategic importance of controlling the Channel and maritime trade routes. Domestically, he strengthened the administration of justice, refined taxation mechanisms, and maintained oversight over regional governance through sheriffs and royal officials. Edward III's long reign allowed for the development of institutions that would support subsequent monarchs and the continued integration of England into continental affairs. Richard II, who ascended the throne in 1377 at the age of 10, faced immediate challenges associated with minority rule, including reliance on regents and noble factions. His early reign coincided with the ongoing Hundred Years' War, the continued social and economic consequences of the Black Death, and domestic unrest exemplified by the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Richard's attempts to assert personal authority in the face of baronial opposition led to political instability and the eventual deposition in 1399 by Henry Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV. Richard II's removal from the throne marked the end of the direct line of Plantagenet kings descending from Henry II and set the stage for the Lancastrian succession. Throughout the early Plantagenet period, the monarchy faced the dual pressures of maintaining authority over an increasingly complex domestic structure and asserting influence over continental holdings. Legal and administrative reforms implemented by Henry II and Edward I provided mechanisms to standardize justice, manage taxation, and enforce feudal obligations, contributing to the centralization of royal power. Military campaigns in Wales, Scotland, and France tested the effectiveness of these reforms, while conflicts with barons and disputes over succession highlighted the fragility of monarchical authority in periods of weak leadership or minority rule. The Angevin and early Plantagenet monarchs relied on strategic marriages to secure alliances and consolidate power both domestically and abroad. Henry II's marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine integrated extensive territories into the English crown, while subsequent dynastic unions sought to strengthen claims to France, manage regional loyalties, and ensure continuity of governance. The period also saw significant interactions with the Church, with disputes over clerical appointments, taxation, and legal jurisdiction requiring careful negotiation to maintain ecclesiastical support and legitimacy. The financial and administrative structures established during this period reflected the increasing sophistication of the monarchy. Royal exchequer systems allowed for the systematic collection of revenues, while writs and itinerant justices extended the crown's reach into local jurisdictions. Military obligations under feudal tenure provided a basis for mobilizing forces, although reliance on baronial cooperation meant that royal authority was often contingent on the support of powerful landholders. Despite these dependencies, the early Plantagenet kings effectively maintained the integrity of the kingdom, managing internal disputes, asserting control over Wales and Scotland, and engaging in sustained campaigns in France to protect and expand continental interests. Succession disputes remained a recurring challenge throughout this period. The deaths of heirs, minority kings, and contested claims required careful management to prevent civil war. Magna Carta, issued under John, and subsequent adaptations under Henry III and Edward I, reflected an evolving understanding of the balance between monarchical authority and baronial rights. These legal precedents laid the foundation for the development of parliamentary institutions and provided mechanisms for negotiating political conflicts without resorting to widespread warfare. The military campaigns of the early Plantagenets emphasized both offensive and defensive strategies. Castles, fortifications, and fortified towns provided bases for regional control, while standing forces and feudal levies allowed for rapid mobilization. Naval power, particularly under Edward III, became increasingly important for defending trade routes and projecting influence across the Channel. Campaigns in Scotland, including the long-running Wars of Independence, required adaptation to terrain and the logistical challenges of extended operations, illustrating the evolving sophistication of military administration. Economic developments during the Plantagenet period included the expansion of towns, markets, and trade networks, both domestically and with continental Europe. Taxation mechanisms supported military campaigns and administrative expenditures, while the crown sought to regulate coinage, commerce, and tolls to ensure economic stability. Population fluctuations, exacerbated by the Black Death, influenced labor availability, agricultural productivity, and social relations, requiring adjustments in governance and fiscal policy. The Plantagenet kings also pursued policies of legal standardization and codification. Henry II's establishment of common law principles, the use of itinerant justices, and the documentation of charters created a framework for the consistent application of law. Edward I's legislative measures, including statutes regulating land tenure, criminal justice, and urban governance, further consolidated royal authority. These legal developments provided continuity across generations and reinforced the monarchy's capacity to govern effectively. By the end of Richard II's reign in 1399, the early Plantagenet period had established the structures of centralized authority, legal standardization, and military administration that would shape the English monarchy for centuries. The combination of domestic consolidation, military engagement abroad, and integration of ecclesiastical and feudal systems created a resilient framework for governance. Despite periodic challenges from baronial opposition, minority rule, and succession disputes, the early Plantagenet monarchs successfully maintained the continuity of the English crown and prepared the kingdom for the dynastic conflicts and transformations of the Lancastrian and Yorkist periods. The Lancastrian branch of the Plantagenet dynasty began with Henry IV, who seized the English throne in 1399 after deposing Richard II. Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, justified his claim by virtue of his lineage and widespread dissatisfaction with Richard II's perceived mismanagement and arbitrary rule. Henry IV's reign, from 1399 to 1413, was characterized by efforts to consolidate royal authority following the deposition and to secure the loyalty of the nobility, whose support had been crucial to his accession. Early in his reign, he faced rebellions from both domestic factions and rival claimants, including the Percys of Northumberland, whose initial support turned into open revolt, culminating in the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403, where Henry's forces defeated rebel factions, solidifying his authority. Henry IV also contended with the Welsh uprising led by Owain Glyndwr, beginning in 1400. This revolt aimed to restore Welsh independence and resist English domination, resulting in protracted military campaigns, sieges, and shifting territorial control. Although the rebellion was ultimately suppressed by 1415, it significantly taxed royal finances and required the maintenance of loyal forces across border regions. Henry IV's administration relied on careful management of taxation and feudal obligations to sustain military campaigns, and he sought to reinforce central authority through the appointment of loyal sheriffs, justices of the peace, and regional officials balancing fiscal extraction with the need for baronial support. Henry V, who reigned from 1413 to 1422, inherited both the domestic and foreign challenges of his father's rule. His reign is noted for extensive military campaigns in France, culminating in the decisive Battle of Agincourt in 1415 during the Hundred Years' War. Henry V's strategies included maintaining disciplined armies, effective use of longbowmen, and the coordination of infantry and cavalry to achieve battlefield superiority. His success at Agincourt allowed him to consolidate English territorial claims in northern France and strengthen his diplomatic position, leading to the Treaty of Troyes in 1420, which recognized Henry as heir and regent of France. These military and diplomatic achievements enhanced the prestige of the Lancastrian monarchy and extended its influence abroad. Henry V's death in 1422 left the throne to his infant son, Henry VI, initiating a minority government overseen by regents, including the Duke of Bedford and the Bishop of Winchester. Henry VI's minority, which extended until he reached majority in 1437, was generally stable, managed by experienced officials who continued English territorial expansion in France and attempted to enforce domestic governance. Upon reaching adulthood, Henry VI's personal rule revealed weaknesses in leadership, particularly in matters of finance, administration, and military command. His inability to maintain English holdings in France, combined with internal factionalism among the nobility, gradually undermined royal authority and contributed to the onset of civil unrest. The instability of Henry VI's reign intensified in the 1450s as disputes between noble factions escalated, particularly between the houses of Lancaster and York, each asserting claims to the throne based on Plantagenet lineage and grievances over governance. These disputes culminated in the Wars of the Roses, a series of dynastic conflicts spanning 1455 to 1485. Early confrontations, including the First Battle of St. Albans in 1455, reflected the breakdown of central authority and the mobilization of private armies by competing magnates. The wars were characterized by shifting alliances, contested successions, and repeated engagements that caused significant disruption to both regional administration and economic activity. Edward, Duke of York, emerged as a principal challenger to Henry VI, asserting a claim through descent from Edmund of Langley, Duke of York. His sons, including Edward IV, played central roles in the conflict. Edward IV ultimately seized the throne in 1461 after the decisive Battle of Towton, which solidified his claim and marked the height of Yorkist ascendancy. Edward IV's reign involved efforts to stabilize governance, restore royal authority, and address the fractured loyalty of the nobility. His administration relied on centralized fiscal management, strategic marriage alliances, and careful distribution of offices and lands to secure support from key magnates while mitigating the threat of Lancastrian uprisings. Edward IV's rule was interrupted in 1470 to 1471 by the temporary restoration of Henry VI through the efforts of Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker. This period, during which Henry VI regained the throne briefly, highlighted the ongoing volatility of the English monarchy and the critical role of noble alliances in determining succession. Edward IV regained power after the decisive Battle of Barnet in 1471, which resulted in Warwick's death, and the subsequent Battle of Tewkesbury, which ended Lancastrian resistance and led to the death of Henry VI's son, Edward of Westminster. The restoration of Edward IV reinforced Yorkist dominance and allowed for renewed efforts to consolidate administrative control, strengthen legal oversight, and stabilize regional governance after decades of civil conflict. Edward IV's second reign included measures to reform fiscal administration, maintain law and order, and manage relations with continental powers, particularly France and Burgundy. The king sought to reduce the financial autonomy of overmighty subjects and limit the use of private retinues for political purposes. Edward IV's death in 1483 precipitated another succession crisis, as his young son, Edward V, ascended the throne at the age of 12. Edward V's brief reign was disrupted by the intervention of his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who assumed the throne as Richard III. The circumstances surrounding Edward V's deposition and subsequent disappearance, likely at the Tower of London, underscore the continued fragility of dynastic succession during this period. Richard III's reign, from 1483 to 1485, was marked by efforts to assert authority, suppress opposition, and navigate ongoing challenges posed by surviving Lancastrian claimants. Richard implemented legal and administrative measures to strengthen central governance, including the regulation of local offices, oversight of fiscal obligations, and enforcement of criminal justice. Despite these initiatives, his rule faced persistent threats from displaced Lancastrian supporters and nobles dissatisfied with his seizure of the throne. The final resolution of the Wars of the Roses came with Richard III's defeat at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485 by Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII. This battle effectively ended nearly 3 decades of intermittent dynastic conflict and established the Tudor dynasty, signaling a transition to a new phase of English monarchy. The Lancaster and York period demonstrates the interplay of dynastic claims, military force, and political alliances in determining succession. Repeated conflicts underscored the importance of noble loyalty and military capability in maintaining royal authority. The civil wars disrupted administrative continuity, necessitated the reconstruction of governance structures, and required careful management of finances and territorial control. Castles, fortified towns, and garrisons continued to play a central role in both defense and the assertion of local authority. The monarchy relied on strategic marriages, alliances, and negotiations to secure support and resolve disputes, reflecting the complex interplay of personal and institutional power during this era. The Wars of the Roses also illustrate the evolution of legal and administrative mechanisms designed to manage succession disputes and regional governance. Both Lancastrian and Yorkist monarchs sought to regulate land tenure, enforce feudal obligations, and maintain fiscal oversight as a means of consolidating authority. The conflict prompted the development of procedures for resolving disputes over inheritance, title, and office, laying the groundwork for more structured systems of governance in subsequent periods. The periodic intervention of parliaments, councils, and advisory bodies during succession crises further demonstrated the increasing role of institutional mechanisms in supporting the monarchy while balancing the interests of powerful noble families. Military organization remained central to governance throughout this period. Both Lancastrian and Yorkist forces relied on feudal levies, private retinues, and professional soldiers to conduct campaigns, defend territories, and suppress uprisings. The use of archers, cavalry, and infantry in combined operations reflected the adaptation of traditional feudal warfare to evolving tactical needs. Castles served as strategic bases, enabling the projection of military power into contested regions and providing strongholds against rival factions. Control over key urban centers and transport routes was essential for logistical support, taxation collection, and the enforcement of legal authority. Economic and social structures were directly affected by the ongoing conflicts between Lancaster and York. Recurrent warfare disrupted agriculture, trade, and urban development, requiring monarchs to implement policies aimed at stabilizing revenue streams, ensuring food supply, and maintaining public order. Taxation, fines, and feudal dues were adjusted to support military expenditures, while administrative reforms sought to standardize collection procedures and minimize inefficiencies. The period also saw continued development of towns, markets, and craft industries, which provided both economic resources and administrative focal points for royal governance. The relationship between the monarchy and the church remained a critical factor throughout the Lancastrian and Yorkist period. Ecclesiastical authorities provided not only moral legitimacy, but also administrative support, including record-keeping, mediation, and enforcement of law. Kings relied on clerical personnel for literacy, administration of justice, and management of estates, while the church sought protection of privileges and influence over appointments and governance. Negotiation and occasional conflict with bishops, abbots, and monastic institutions were characteristic of the period, reflecting the dual dependence of monarchy and church on each other's authority. Succession disputes and dynastic claims were the defining feature of this period, demonstrating the fragility of hereditary monarchy in the absence of clear primogeniture or uncontested claims. The deposition of Richard II, the intermittent restoration of Henry VI, and the eventual triumph of the Tudor claimant illustrate the cyclical nature of political instability. Strategic marriages, alliances, and the management of noble support were essential to both Lancastrian and Yorkish strategies, as military victory alone was insufficient to guarantee long-term stability without broader political and social legitimacy. Throughout the Lancaster and York period, the monarchy evolved in response to internal and external pressures. Legal codification, administrative reforms, military organization, and diplomatic engagement were all adapted to the exigencies of civil war and contested succession. Central authority was repeatedly challenged, necessitating the development of mechanisms for negotiating loyalty, resolving disputes, and consolidating power. Despite ongoing conflict, the period established precedents for the management of succession crises, the integration of noble and royal interests, and the balancing of military, fiscal, and administrative demands in the governance of England. By the end of Richard III's reign, the cumulative experience of nearly a century of dynastic conflict had demonstrated both the resilience and vulnerability of the English monarchy. Effective control required not only military capability, but also institutional structures, fiscal management, and strategic alliances. The transition from Yorkist to Tudor rule represented both continuity and change. Continuity in the reliance on feudal and legal structures, military organization, and central administration. Change in the establishment of a new dynastic framework capable of consolidating power, stabilizing succession, and fostering centralized governance. The experiences of the Lancaster and York periods would inform subsequent Tudor policies aimed at ensuring the long-term stability and authority of the English crown. The Tudor dynasty commenced with the accession of Henry VII in 1485, following his victory at the Battle of Bosworth Field, which marked the conclusion of the Wars of the Roses. Henry Tudor's claim to the throne was relatively weak. Based on his descent from the Beaufort line, a legitimized branch of the Lancastrian house. Yet his victory consolidated the monarchy under a new dynasty and initiated a period of political stabilization. Henry VII's reign, from 1485 to 1509, focused on consolidating authority, restoring fiscal stability, and securing the loyalty of the nobility through both legal mechanisms and strategic marriage alliances. One of his most significant measures was the cultivation of loyalty among previously overmighty subjects, achieved by summoning key nobles to court, requiring bonds for good behavior, and exercising careful oversight of feudal obligations. Henry VII also reformed financial administration to strengthen the crown's revenues and reduce dependence on parliamentary subsidies. The establishment of the Court of the Exchequer and the expansion of fiscal instruments, such as fines and bonds, allowed the monarchy to accumulate resources while simultaneously curbing potential threats from powerful nobles. Henry's foreign policy emphasized careful diplomatic alliances, exemplified by the Treaty of Medina del Campo with Spain in 1489, which secured the marriage of his son Arthur to Catherine of Aragon and maintained a balance of power in continental Europe. Domestically, Henry dealt with multiple conspiracies and pretenders, including Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck, both claiming to have legitimate claims to the throne. These challenges were neutralized through a combination of military action, legal prosecution, and strategic accommodation of influential nobles. Henry VII's son, Henry VIII, who reigned from 1509 to 1547, inherited a stable monarchy, but faced both internal and external pressures that would reshape the nature of English kingship. Early in his reign, Henry VIII continued his father's policies of fiscal management and consolidation of royal authority, while demonstrating martial and diplomatic ambition. The early years included campaigns against France in 1512 to 1514, resulting in limited territorial gains and the reinforcement of English prestige abroad. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, formalized in 1509, initially strengthened alliances with Spain and bolstered dynastic legitimacy, but succession concerns would soon dominate both domestic and ecclesiastical policy. Henry VIII's most significant transformation of the monarchy was the establishment of religious independence from the papacy. In the 1530s, following the failure of the papacy to grant an annulment of his marriage to Catherine, Henry initiated a series of legal and ecclesiastical measures that resulted in the English Reformation. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 declared the king as supreme head of the Church of England, effectively severing ties with Rome. This development involved extensive legislation, including the dissolution of the monasteries between 1536 and 1541, which transferred vast ecclesiastical properties and wealth to the crown, simultaneously strengthening royal authority and reshaping the economic and social landscape. Henry VIII's Reformation policies also required a restructuring of ecclesiastical governance, the creation of a loyal episcopacy, and the enforcement of doctrinal conformity through legal instruments, such as treason statutes related to religious dissent. Succession remained a persistent concern throughout Henry VIII's reign. His marriages and the status of his offspring dominated both domestic and foreign policy. Henry's legitimate male heirs were initially limited to Edward, born of Jane Seymour in 1537, following the annulment of his first marriage and the subsequent deaths or repudiations of his other wives. Mary, his daughter by Catherine of Aragon, and Elizabeth by Anne Boleyn, were subjected to complex legal and dynastic negotiations to ensure legitimacy and clarity of succession. The succession issue also shaped relations with European powers, as the stability of the Tudor monarchy was central to alliances and the negotiation of treaties, while contested claims could provoke both internal rebellion and external intervention. Edward VI, who reigned from 1547 to 1553, ascended the throne as a child, necessitating regency governance under figures such as Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, and later John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Edward's reign focused on the continuation and consolidation of Protestant reforms, including the introduction of the Book of Common Prayer, revisions to liturgical practices, and enforcement of doctrinal conformity. The governance of a minority king required careful management of noble factions, fiscal oversight, and military readiness, particularly in response to external threats from Scotland and France. Edward's premature death in 1553 reopened questions of succession and prompted political maneuvering among competing claimants. Mary I, ruling from 1553 to 1558, restored Roman Catholicism following Edward VI's Protestant reforms, implementing policies to reassert papal authority and reintegrate England into the Catholic fold. Her reign included the reconciliation of ecclesiastical structures with Rome, the re-establishment of monasteries and episcopal hierarchy under papal guidance, and the enforcement of religious conformity through legislation. Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain in 1554 reflected both dynastic ambition and international alliance strategy, though it also raised concerns over foreign influence in domestic governance. Military efforts during her reign, including the attempted recovery of Calais from France, failed, underscoring the limitations of English military capacity and the complexities of European diplomacy. Elizabeth I, ascending in 1558, presided over a period of religious settlement, political stabilization, and cultural development. The Elizabethan religious settlement of 1559 established the Church of England's independence while instituting moderate practices designed to reduce internal conflict. Elizabeth's reign also emphasized naval expansion, territorial defense, and diplomatic engagement, particularly in response to Spanish ambitions in the Atlantic and continental Europe. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 represented a culmination of strategic maritime policy, naval organization, and intelligence operations, reinforcing English sovereignty and naval prestige. Elizabeth's domestic administration relied on careful management of the nobility, including the regulation of patronage, oversight of regional officials, and the maintenance of legal and fiscal structures. Parliament was consulted primarily on taxation and legislative approval, but the Crown retained significant prerogatives in governance. Elizabeth's approach to succession, maintaining ambiguity to prevent factional conflict, reflected the ongoing sensitivity of dynastic issues. Despite her failure to produce an heir, Elizabeth's long reign ensured the stability of the Tudor monarchy, the consolidation of Protestantism, and the establishment of institutions that balanced royal authority with the evolving influence of Parliament and legal frameworks. The Tudor dynasty oversaw significant economic, social, and cultural transformation. Agricultural practices evolved, The gentry expanded in influence and wealth, and urban centers developed as commercial and administrative hubs. Maritime exploration and trade expanded under royal sponsorship, leading to early colonization efforts and increased engagement in continental commerce. The Crown's financial policies, including customs duties, fines, and taxation of trade, supported both domestic governance and military operations, reinforcing the monarchy's capacity to project authority internally and externally. Legal and administrative reforms under the Tudors further centralized governance. Henry VIII's and Edward VII's statutes reinforced royal prerogative, standardized legal procedures, and reduced regional autonomy. Elizabeth I maintained and refined these systems, using courts, councils, and officials to ensure compliance with law and policy across England. The monarchy's increasing reliance on written records, charters, and statutory instruments enhanced continuity of administration and institutional memory, allowing successive monarchs to build upon established governance mechanisms. The Tudor period also illustrates the interaction between domestic governance and international relations. Marriages, alliances, and diplomatic negotiations were critical to securing dynastic legitimacy and national security. The monarchy's management of succession, religion, and foreign alliances shaped both domestic policy and international strategy, ensuring that England could navigate the complex dynamics of 16th century Europe. Military campaigns, including those in France, Scotland, and Ireland, required coordination of resources, strategic planning, and adaptation to evolving warfare technologies and tactics, reflecting the increasing sophistication of royal administration and command structures. The Tudor monarchs faced persistent challenges from noble factions, religious dissent, and contested succession. Effective governance required negotiation, enforcement of legal authority, and strategic use of military force. Rebellions such as the Pilgrimage of Grace during Henry VIII's reign and Wyatt's rebellion during Elizabeth I's were suppressed through coordinated military and legal measures, illustrating the Crown's capacity to manage internal threats while maintaining long-term stability. The management of these crises contributed to the development of precedent and institutional knowledge, informing both immediate and future royal policy. Throughout the Tudor dynasty, the monarchy also pursued the promotion of education, literacy, and administrative competency. Clerks, advisors, and administrators were recruited for their expertise, supporting the collection of taxes, enforcement of law, and management of royal estates. These personnel provided continuity of governance and facilitated the centralization of authority, enabling monarchs to exert influence over distant regions and diverse populations effectively. The integration of legal, financial, and administrative expertise into the structure of the monarchy reflected the evolving demands of centralized governance in a period of significant political, religious, and social transformation. By 1603, the Tudor dynasty had fundamentally reshaped the English monarchy. The centralization of authority, consolidation of religious and legal structures, expansion of maritime and trade influence, and careful management of succession issues established precedents for governance that would endure into the Stuart era. The political, economic, and cultural achievements of the Tudors ensured the continuity and stability of the English crown, despite the absence of a direct heir, setting the stage for the accession of James VI of Scotland as James I of England and the subsequent Stuart dynasty. The Stuart dynasty began in England with the accession of James VI of Scotland as James I of England in 1603. Following the death of Elizabeth I, James was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, and his accession united the crowns of England and Scotland, creating a personal union while maintaining separate parliaments, legal systems, and administrations for each kingdom. James I, who ruled until 1625, inherited a monarchy that had been strengthened under the Tudors in terms of centralized authority, religious establishment, and fiscal capacity, yet he also faced significant challenges in managing expectations of both the English nobility and Parliament. James I emphasized the divine right of kings, asserting that monarchs were accountable only to God and not to their subjects. This principle informed his approach to governance, including taxation, legislative oversight, and foreign policy. James's insistence on prerogative authority often conflicted with Parliament, particularly over financial matters. Despite these tensions, he maintained relative stability through careful management of court patronage, legal administration, and foreign diplomacy. One of the significant challenges during his reign was religious tension, particularly regarding the treatment of Catholics and Puritans. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605, in which a group of Catholic conspirators attempted to assassinate James and the members of Parliament, exemplified the intersection of religious dissent and political security, prompting stricter enforcement of penal laws against recusants and increased surveillance of subversive activity. James I also sought to maintain and expand England's influence abroad, emphasizing alliances through marriage, treaties, and diplomatic negotiation. He negotiated peace with Spain and attempted to arrange a dynastic marriage between his children and continental powers. Economic policy included efforts to expand trade and support colonial ventures, although these initiatives were limited by financial constraints and competing domestic priorities. James's focus on intellectual and cultural patronage reflected his interest in the promotion of learning, administration of law, and consolidation of royal authority through ideological as well as institutional means. Upon James's death in 1625, his son Charles I ascended to the throne. Charles's reign, from 1625 to 1649, was dominated by conflicts over royal prerogative, taxation, and religious policy, which ultimately culminated in the English Civil War. Charles I continued the Stuart emphasis on divine right, seeking to govern without parliamentary interference in fiscal and religious matters. His methods of raising revenue, including ship money and forced loans, bypassed parliamentary consent and generated widespread opposition. Religious policy, particularly efforts to enforce uniformity through the Anglican Church and align practices with a high church ethos, provoked resistance from Puritans, Presbyterians, and other nonconformist groups, exacerbating tensions between the crown and sections of society. Military and administrative failures, including the failed campaigns in Scotland during the Bishops' Wars, 1639 to 1640, further weakened Charles's position. The inability to finance these campaigns without parliamentary cooperation forced the king to convene the Long Parliament in 1640, during which grievances against royal policies and ministers were formally articulated. Parliamentary opposition coalesced around legal, religious, and fiscal grievances, leading to escalating conflict. Negotiations failed to resolve disputes, and in 1642 Charles raised his standard at Nottingham, initiating open civil war between royalist forces loyal to the king. and parliamentarian forces often called Roundheads who sought to limit royal authority and reform governance structures. The English Civil War, extending from 1642 to 1651, encompassed multiple military campaigns, sieges, and regional conflicts. The war involved complex alliances and shifting loyalties among the nobility, gentry, and urban centers. Parliamentarian forces, under commanders such as Sir Thomas Fairfax and Oliver Cromwell, developed disciplined infantry and cavalry, relying on the new model army to achieve operational effectiveness. The Royalist strategy relied on traditional feudal levies and regional strongholds, but was hampered by logistical difficulties and inconsistent support. Key engagements included the Battle of Marston Moor in 1644 and the Battle of Naseby in 1645, which decisively weakened Royalist capacity and shifted momentum in favor of Parliament. Following military defeat, Charles I was captured, tried, and executed in 1649 for high treason, marking the abolition of the monarchy and the establishment of the Commonwealth of England under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. This period, known as the Interregnum, 1649 to 1660, saw the consolidation of parliamentary and military authority, the development of republican institutions, and efforts to govern without a monarch. Cromwell's rule as Lord Protector included administrative reforms, military campaigns in Ireland and Scotland, and regulation of trade and commerce, reflecting a continuation of central governance, albeit under a non-monarchical framework. The monarchy was restored in 1660 with Charles II, son of Charles I, ascending to the throne. Charles II's reign, from 1660 to 1685, was characterized by the restoration of traditional institutions, reconciliation with former opponents, and efforts to maintain royal authority while navigating parliamentary power. The Restoration settlement reinstated the Church of England, restored the legal and administrative systems disrupted during the Interregnum, and re-established the financial mechanisms of the Crown. Charles II's foreign policy emphasized alliances and maritime expansion, including engagement in European conflicts and promotion of trade. Domestically, the monarchy managed ongoing religious tensions, including persecution of Catholics and dissenters, while balancing the interests of Parliament in matters of taxation and legislation. James II succeeded Charles II in 1685 and pursued policies emphasizing Catholicism and royal prerogative, which provoked widespread opposition. James's attempts to promote religious tolerance for Catholics, appoint Catholics to positions of authority, and circumvent parliamentary restrictions alarmed Protestant political elites and created conditions for a constitutional crisis. In 1688, William of Orange and his wife, Mary, the daughter of James II, were invited by English nobles to intervene militarily, leading to the Glorious Revolution. James II fled England, and William and Mary were installed as joint sovereigns, establishing a constitutional framework that limited monarchical authority and affirmed parliamentary supremacy. The reign of William III and Mary II, from 1689 to 1702, saw the formalization of constitutional monarchy, codified in the Bill of Rights, 1689, and other statutes. These laws restricted the powers of the monarch, required regular parliamentary consent for taxation, and protected the rights of subjects, creating a durable framework for the balance of power between crown and legislature. Religious settlement continued under the Toleration Act, 1689, allowing for limited freedoms for Protestant dissenters while maintaining the Church of England as the established church. William's foreign policy focused on alliances against France and the maintenance of a continental balance of power, while domestic governance involved coordination with Parliament to finance military campaigns and manage fiscal obligations. Following Mary II's death in 1694, William III ruled alone until 1702. The subsequent accession of Anne, sister of Mary II, from 1702 to 1714, continued the development of the constitutional monarchy. Anne's reign was marked by domestic and foreign achievements, including the War of the Spanish Succession, conducted in conjunction with European allies to prevent French hegemony on the continent. Domestically, and oversaw the Acts of Union in 1707, uniting the kingdoms of England and Scotland into the single kingdom of Great Britain. This formal union centralized governance under a unified parliament while maintaining regional legal and administrative distinctions, reflecting the careful balance of central authority and local autonomy. Anne's administration also continued the evolution of political parties, with the Whigs and Tories emerging as central actors in governance. Parliamentary authority was strengthened through the regular convening of sessions, the negotiation of fiscal policies, and the development of cabinet practices, with ministers increasingly responsible for executing policy and coordinating between the Crown and legislature. The death of Anne in 1714, without surviving issue, ended the direct Stuart line and set the stage for the accession of George I of Hanover, initiating the Hanoverian dynasty. The Stuart period illustrates the evolving relationship between monarchy, parliament, and society. The reigns of James I and Charles I highlighted the challenges of divine right monarchy in a context where legal precedent, fiscal expectations, and political negotiation constrained royal authority. The Civil War and interregnum demonstrated both the fragility of monarchical power and the capacity for alternative forms of governance under republican frameworks. The Restoration and subsequent Glorious Revolution established mechanisms for balancing executive authority with parliamentary oversight, ensuring stability and continuity even as the crown remained a central symbol of national unity. Military organization, fiscal administration, and legal reform were central to the Stuart monarchy's ability to govern. The Civil War, subsequent Republican administration, and Restoration required adaptation to shifting political circumstances, with armies, taxation, and legal instruments serving as tools of statecraft. The development of standing armies, professional bureaucracy, and centralized record-keeping enhanced administrative capacity, allowing for more consistent enforcement of royal and parliamentary decisions across the kingdom. These innovations laid the groundwork for the later Hanoverian period and the establishment of a modern constitutional monarchy in Britain. Religious policy was a persistent concern throughout the Stuart dynasty. Conflicts between Anglicans, Puritans, Catholics, and dissenters shaped both domestic governance and foreign relations. Monarchical attempts to regulate worship, enforce doctrinal conformity, and secure loyalty from religious communities frequently intersected with political challenges, influencing legislation, administrative appointments, and military mobilization. The Glorious Revolution and subsequent legislation codified limitations on monarchical influence over religious affairs, creating a framework that balanced ecclesiastical authority, parliamentary oversight, and the rights of subjects. Economic and social developments during the Stuart period were closely intertwined with political and military imperatives. Revenue collection, trade regulation, urban development, and colonial expansion were all managed in the context of ongoing governance challenges. Fiscal innovation, including the establishment of government bonds and the use of excise taxes, supported military campaigns and administrative expansion. The development of financial institutions, including the Bank of England in 1694, reflected the increasing sophistication of economic management, enabling the Crown and Parliament to fund both domestic governance and international engagement. By 1714, the Stuart monarchy had transformed England's political landscape, establishing enduring precedents for constitutional governance, legal and fiscal administration, and the management of succession. The integration of parliamentary authority, judicial oversight, and administrative competence provided a foundation for long-term stability, even as dynastic lines shifted. The experiences of the Stuart monarchs, encompassing both absolute claims to power and negotiated settlements with representative institutions, informed the subsequent Hanoverian approach to governance and the evolution of Britain as a unified, constitutional state. The Hanoverian dynasty began with the accession of George I in 1714 following the death of Queen Anne, the last Stuart monarch. George I, Elector of Hanover, was a Protestant descendant of James I through his granddaughter Sophia of Hanover, whose succession was confirmed by the Act of Settlement 1701. This legislation ensured that the English throne would remain in Protestant hands, barring Catholics from succession. George I's accession marked a significant transition, as he spoke little English and relied heavily on ministers to manage the functions of government. The Hanoverian period was therefore characterized by the development of cabinet government, the increased authority of ministers, and the establishment of parliamentary dominance in political decision-making, while maintaining the monarchy as a symbol of national unity and dynastic continuity. George I's reign, from 1714 to 1727, emphasized the consolidation of the constitutional monarchy established under the Stuart settlement. He faced challenges both domestically and internationally. Domestically, he confronted Jacobite opposition, notably the 1715 Rising, which sought to restore the Stuart line through the claim of James Francis Edward Stuart, the Old Pretender. The uprising involved coordinated efforts by Scottish clans and sympathizers in England, but was suppressed through military force, strategic intelligence, and fiscal mobilization. The rebellion underscored the continuing potential for dynastic conflict and the necessity of maintaining loyal forces, fortified garrisons, and coordinated regional administration. Parliamentary authority was central to governance during George I's reign. Ministers, such as Robert Walpole, emerged as key figures in administering policy, managing fiscal matters, and ensuring loyalty among the nobility and commercial elites. Walpole, often regarded as the first de facto prime minister, consolidated financial administration, supervised taxation, and managed public debt. The development of the South Sea Company and subsequent financial crises highlighted the increasing interdependence of government, commerce, and finance, prompting the refinement of fiscal oversight, regulatory mechanisms, and economic policy coordination. George II succeeded his father in 1727 and reigned until 1760. His reign continued the consolidation of parliamentary governance, cabinet administration, and fiscal management. George II's foreign policy involved extensive participation in European conflicts, including the War of the Austrian Succession, 1740 to 1748, and the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. These campaigns required the mobilization of troops, coordination of naval operations, and extensive financial resources. Military organization included the maintenance of a standing army and professional navy, the use of militia forces for domestic security, and the integration of logistical, intelligence, and supply networks to support operations both at home and abroad. Domestically, George II's reign was marked by the further stabilization of political institutions, the regulation of parliamentary procedures, and the management of succession issues. Jacobite opposition persisted, culminating in the 1745 rising led by Charles Edward Stuart, the Young Pretender. The rebellion achieved initial successes in Scotland, including the advance into northern England, but was ultimately defeated at the Battle of Culloden in 1746. The suppression of the Jacobite forces involved a combination of military engagement, administrative control, and the imposition of legal and fiscal measures to prevent recurrence, demonstrating the monarchy's reliance on both armed force and institutional governance to maintain stability. George III, ascending in 1760, reigned during a period of significant political, economic, and social transformation. His reign extended until 1820 and encompassed challenges associated with the empire, industrial development, and constitutional evolution. George III initially sought to exercise influence over ministerial appointments and policy, reflecting the residual prerogatives of monarchy, yet increasingly relied on parliamentary cooperation to manage both domestic and international affairs. The American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, marked a major challenge to British imperial authority, requiring coordination of military, naval, and fiscal resources across the Atlantic. The loss of the 13 American colonies involved complex considerations of logistics, diplomacy, and governance, influencing subsequent colonial administration and strategic policy in remaining imperial territories. Domestically, George III's reign included the continuation of financial and legal reforms to support industrial expansion, urbanization, and trade. The Industrial Revolution transformed economic structures, including the mechanization of textile production, the development of coal and iron industries, and the expansion of transportation networks. These changes increased the complexity of taxation, regulation, and social policy, necessitating coordination between government, parliament, and emerging commercial interests. Legal reforms standardized procedures, strengthened property rights, and provided mechanisms for dispute resolution essential to industrial and commercial growth. George III's later reign was marked by political instability and challenges to his authority, including opposition from ministers and reformist factions. Periods of mental incapacity, particularly during the 1780s and 1810s, led to the establishment of regency governance under his son, George IV. Regency structures involved formal mechanisms for administration, fiscal management, and oversight of domestic and foreign policy, reflecting the institutionalization of ministerial authority and parliamentary oversight. These arrangements ensured continuity of governance and reinforced the constitutional framework established during the Stuart period and developed under early Hanoverian administration. George IV, who formally became king in 1820 following the Regency period, and William IV, who reigned from 1830 to 1837, presided over periods of political reform, social adjustment, and consolidation of parliamentary authority. Both monarchs operated within constitutional limits established over the preceding century, with ministers managing policy, finances, and legislative agendas. The reigns of George IV and William IV coincided with debates over electoral reform, social policy, and administrative modernization, including the implementation of measures such as the Reform Act of 1832, which expanded the franchise, reallocated parliamentary representation, and strengthened the accountability of government to the electorate. The accession of Victoria in 1837 marked the beginning of a reign that would extend until 1901, making her one of the longest-reigning monarchs in British history. Victoria's reign was defined by the full maturation of the constitutional monarchy, industrial expansion, and the consolidation of the British Empire. The monarch's role increasingly became symbolic and representative, with executive authority exercised by ministers in conjunction with Parliament. Victoria's government oversaw extensive legal and administrative reforms, including the codification of laws, standardization of procedures, and professionalization of civil service, ensuring the effective management of an increasingly complex society. Empire expansion was central to the Hanoverian period under Victoria. British territories in India, Africa, Australasia, and the Caribbean were administered through colonial governance structures that integrated local and imperial administration. Policies included economic regulation, judicial oversight, infrastructure development, and the imposition of fiscal systems to support both local governance and metropolitan needs. Naval power and military organization were maintained at a high level to secure trade routes, protect colonies, and ensure the enforcement of imperial authority. The period also saw the expansion of the global economy, facilitated by technological innovations, commercial networks, and financial institutions capable of supporting international trade and investment. Social transformation accompanied economic and imperial developments. Urbanization increased, requiring public health measures, transportation infrastructure, and municipal governance reforms. Industrialization altered labor relations, prompted legislation on working conditions, and necessitated education and skill development initiatives. The monarchy maintained a stabilizing role in society, providing symbolic continuity and national cohesion, while ministers and parliament managed the operational requirements of governance, fiscal administration, and social policy. Constitutional principles were fully established and institutionalized during the Hanoverian period. Parliamentary sovereignty, ministerial accountability, and the ceremonial role of the monarchy were entrenched through legislation, political precedent, and administrative practice. Legal institutions, including courts and local governance structures, enforced statutory obligations, regulated property and commercial activity, and maintained public order. Fiscal institutions, including the management of taxation, public debt, and currency, supported both domestic governance and international engagement, reflecting the increasing complexity of state administration in a modernizing society. The Hanoverian monarchy also navigated the development of political parties, including the Whigs and Tories, which shaped policy, elections, and ministerial appointments. Cabinet governance, the professionalization of civil service, and the regular convening of Parliament created mechanisms for negotiation, policy formulation, and dispute resolution, ensuring the stability of governance across successive reigns. The monarchy retained symbolic authority, ceremonial prominence, and oversight of appointments, while practical governance was increasingly the responsibility of ministers accountable to Parliament. By the end of the 19th century, the Hanoverian dynasty under Victoria had transformed the English monarchy into a constitutional institution integrated into a modern, industrial, and imperial state. The period was characterized by institutional continuity, effective administration, expansion of civil and political rights, and the projection of British influence globally. The monarchy's evolution reflected the balance between symbolic authority and ministerial governance, providing stability, continuity, and legitimacy in an era of rapid social, economic, and political change. The modern Windsor monarchy began with the accession of Edward VII in 1901 following the death of Queen Victoria, marking the transition from the long Victorian era to the 20th century. Edward VII, the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, had served as Prince of Wales for more than 50 years, during which he cultivated extensive experience in state and diplomatic affairs. His reign, lasting until 1910, represented a period of modernization and adaptation of the monarchy to changing political, social, and technological circumstances. Edward VII emphasized the ceremonial and representative role of the monarch, maintaining national cohesion while allowing ministers to exercise executive authority in accordance with constitutional principles established under his predecessors. Edward VII's domestic policy relied primarily on the maintenance of social order, oversight of the administration, and support for legislation passed by Parliament. While he did not directly initiate legislative reforms, Edward played an influential role in shaping public perception of the monarchy and facilitating the smooth operation of constitutional processes. Foreign policy under Edward VII focused on the strengthening of diplomatic ties with European powers, particularly France and Russia, as part of the Entente Cordiale signed in 1904. This agreement reflected the monarchy's role in ceremonial diplomacy and the broader strategy of maintaining balance among European states. Edward VII also oversaw the continued development of government institutions, the modernization of court administration, and the adaptation of ceremonial practices to reflect contemporary expectations of the monarchy's visibility and public engagement. Edward VII was succeeded in 1910 by George V, whose reign extended until 1936. George V's reign encompassed profound political, social, and military transformations, including the First World War, domestic political reform, and the restructuring of the British Empire. George V assumed the throne during a period of constitutional evolution, in which Parliament exercised increasing influence over legislation, fiscal policy, and foreign affairs. George's role in government was consistent with the principles of constitutional monarchy. He provided formal assent to legislation, advised ministers, and represented the nation ceremonially, while policy and administration were executed by ministers accountable to Parliament. George V's early reign included the continuation of domestic political reforms, including the expansion of the electorate through the Representation of the People Acts of 1918 and 1928, which broadened suffrage to include virtually all adult men and women. These reforms reflected broader social and political changes, including the increasing influence of organized labor, the emergence of the Labour Party as a significant political force, and the reorganization of parliamentary representation to reflect population shifts and urbanization. The monarchy's role was primarily symbolic, providing continuity and legitimacy while ministers implemented the practical requirements of governance. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, constituted the most significant challenge of George V's reign, requiring coordination of national resources, military strategy, and public morale. The monarchy contributed to the war effort through ceremonial leadership, representation of the nation's continuity, and engagement with civilian and military institutions. George V's public presence, including visits to military hospitals, inspection of troops, and participation in ceremonial events, reinforced national cohesion. The war also necessitated administrative adaptations, including the mobilization of economic resources, rationing, taxation, and the coordination of colonial contributions to the imperial military effort. The monarchy's symbolic role supported these measures by maintaining morale and reinforcing the legitimacy of government directives. Following the war, George V oversaw the political and administrative reorganization of the British Empire, including adjustments in colonial governance, the integration of dominions such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and the negotiation of constitutional status within the imperial framework. The Statute of Westminster 1931 formalized the legislative independence of the dominions while retaining the monarchy as a shared symbolic institution, demonstrating the continued evolution of royal authority in a multinational context. George V also addressed domestic issues, including economic recovery, labor unrest, and the management of social services, through coordination with ministers and parliamentary institutions. The abdication crisis of 1936 marked a significant episode in the Windsor monarchy. Edward VIII, who succeeded George V, sought to marry Wallis Simpson, a divorced American woman, generating a constitutional conflict over the acceptability of the union. Edward VIII's abdication and the subsequent accession of his brother George VI emphasized the monarchy's adherence to constitutional norms and public expectations, reaffirming the principle that the monarch must act in accordance with law, religious considerations, and the guidance of ministers. George VI's reign, from 1936 to 1952, encompassed the Second World War, post-war reconstruction, and the acceleration of decolonization, requiring the monarchy to adapt to unprecedented global challenges. During the Second World War, 1939 to 1945, George VI and Queen Elizabeth engaged in active ceremonial and public duties to support national morale and maintain continuity of government. The monarchy's presence in London during periods of aerial bombardment, visits to military installations, and participation in civil defense initiatives exemplified its symbolic role in national resilience. While strategic military and economic policy was directed by elected officials and their advisors, the monarchy's visibility contributed to the perception of unity, stability, and legitimacy. Post-war, George VI oversaw the transition of former colonies toward independence, including India and Pakistan in 1947, reflecting the evolution of the monarchy's relationship with global territories from direct administration to symbolic and constitutional linkage. Elizabeth II succeeded George VI in 1952 and reigned until 2022, overseeing a period of modernization, decolonization, and expansion of constitutional and ceremonial responsibilities. Elizabeth II's reign encompassed the continued adaptation of the monarchy to a parliamentary democracy, technological transformation, and social change. The Queen's role emphasized continuity, symbolic representation, and engagement with government institutions, including the formal appointment of prime ministers, participation in state ceremonies, and oversight of ministerial accountability, while practical governance was conducted by elected officials. Elizabeth II's reign included significant international engagement, reflecting the monarchy's role in diplomatic representation and the maintenance of relationships within the Commonwealth. Visits to member states, ceremonial participation in state functions, and support for international initiatives reinforced the symbolic and constitutional authority of the monarchy, while practical governance remained the responsibility of parliamentary ministers. Domestically, Elizabeth II adapted to social transformation, technological advancement, and increased public scrutiny, maintaining ceremonial visibility, facilitating charitable initiatives, and representing the nation in a broad array of cultural and institutional contexts. The Windsor monarchy during the latter half of the 20th century also navigated evolving social and political expectations, including public accountability, media scrutiny, and transparency of royal activities. These developments prompted administrative reforms within the royal household, the professionalization of staff, and strategic communication with the public, while adhering to constitutional limits. The monarchy's symbolic and ceremonial functions were reinforced through national observances, commemoration of historical events, and representation at legislative, judicial, and civic occasions, maintaining continuity with historical precedent. Charles III, ascending the throne in 2022, represents the continuation of the Windsor dynasty into the 21st century. His reign inherits a constitutional monarchy shaped by centuries of legal, administrative, and ceremonial development. Charles III's role emphasizes ceremonial leadership, representation of national identity, and facilitation of ministerial governance, consistent with precedents established under George VI and Elizabeth II. The monarchy continues to adapt to contemporary challenges, including public engagement, technological communication, environmental advocacy, and participation in symbolic and institutional functions across domestic and international domains. Throughout the 20th and early 21st centuries, the Windsor monarchy has been characterized by continuity, adaptability, and adherence to constitutional norms. The institution has maintained symbolic authority, provided representation of national unity, and supported the functioning of government while operating within a framework of parliamentary democracy. Administrative modernization, public accountability, and ceremonial innovation have allowed the monarchy to remain relevant amid social, technological, and political transformation. The continuity of the Windsor dynasty ensures a link between historical precedent, institutional governance, and contemporary national identity. Economic, social, and political developments during the modern Windsor period have influenced the monarchy's function, including the management of estates, financial oversight, and coordination with government policy. The monarchy's participation in ceremonial, diplomatic, and cultural affairs reinforces national cohesion, facilitates continuity across changing political landscapes, and maintains historical traditions of governance, ceremony, and representation. Public and parliamentary support remains central to the monarchy's legitimacy, reflecting the interdependence of symbolic authority and constitutional governance established over the previous 3 centuries. The monarchy's engagement with global affairs, particularly through the Commonwealth and international representation, illustrates the adaptation of historical authority to modern statecraft. The Windsor dynasty has participated in international diplomacy, supported the development of intergovernmental institutions, and represented the United Kingdom in ceremonial, cultural, and political contexts worldwide. These functions, while largely symbolic, reinforce national identity, provide continuity of state presence, and facilitate engagement with evolving international norms and relationships. Domestically, the monarchy's function has included support for charitable and civic institutions, promotion of cultural heritage, and ceremonial participation in state functions. The Crown's involvement in these activities has provided continuity, institutional legitimacy, and symbolic coherence across social, cultural, and political domains. The monarchy's role in constitutional processes, including the formal assent to legislation, appointment of ministers, and ceremonial participation in government, ensures the continuity of governance, legitimacy of institutions, and stability of the political system. The Windsor monarchy has also adapted to changes in public expectation, media presence, and social dynamics. Transparency, engagement with modern communications, and responsiveness to social issues have influenced both ceremonial and operational practices within the royal household. These adaptations reflect the ongoing evolution of monarchy from a politically dominant institution to a constitutional and symbolic entity, capable of providing continuity, representation, and national cohesion in a complex, modern society. By 2025, the Windsor monarchy will have encompassed over a century of adaptation, stability, and continuity, maintaining its role as the constitutional head of state while supporting parliamentary governance. From Edward VII to Charles III, the monarchy has navigated industrial, political, social, and technological transformations, consistently aligning ceremonial authority with constitutional requirements. The modern Windsor monarchy represents the culmination of historical evolution, institutional development, and adaptation to contemporary governance, reflecting a balance of symbolic presence, constitutional function, and public engagement that maintains national stability and continuity into the 21st century.